welcome to ELBJAZZ Festival, the inaugural ELBJAZZ Festival. Are you here in Hamburg for the first time?
This is actually my second time in Hamburg. I played as part of a music festival last September, and I played in the Reeperbahn district, which was very interesting. So I'm very happy to see a different part of Hamburg.
Hamburg is a harbor city, and I guess Vancouver is a little bit similar like Hamburg. Does it in any way remind you of your hometown?
It does a little bit. Seeing all of the ships in the dock and seeing shipyards, that reminds me a little bit of home. But the landscape is quite different. But I always feel sort of at home in Germany when I'm here because I'm half German. My mother is from Berlin. So every time I come to Germany, I keep thinking maybe I'll see family, but I don't know.
So we could do this interview in German?
No, please, no. I don't know very much, so it'd be best, English is best.
So you're still living in Vancouver?
I spend my time between Vancouver and Paris right now. So I'm back and forth, and at the time I am in Paris right now, but I'll be back in Vancouver hopefully in the fall.
You are from the soul, blues, R&B sector, as one could say. How would you describe your style? You just were not, you didn't agree.
I do agree. I'm definitely from the blues world. I'm known as sort of a roots blues jazz artist, and there's a little bit of soul because I feel like that kind of music has quite a bit of soul in it. And because I'm from small towns and small areas in British Columbia, there's a little element of the country in what I do. So yeah, of course, everything you're saying is very true. I do exist in this world. Not so much R&B, but definitely in the blues, the soul, the jazz universe. That's my universe.
I know that there is a wonderful jazz festival in Vancouver, and I wonder where you got in touch with the music that you do, or what the initial musical experiences were for you.
Music was something I came into a lot later. It wasn't my first choice for career. It wasn't necessarily my calling when I was younger. It just sort of happened. And I realized I had this voice and I needed to make music with it. And actually, in order to start, I ended up moving to New York City. And that's where I started singing, and I started playing in small clubs and getting a feel for the blues and for my voice. And then I moved back to Toronto, and then from there back to Vancouver. And it wasn't until much later that I was able to play in some of these festivals. And what I love about jazz festivals, and I feel this is universal, is that they are not specifically jazz. It's so open nowadays. So artists like myself that have maybe a little more of the blues, a little more rock, fit in with people that are classically jazz trained, with fado musicians, with world musicians. And I really, really love the fact that the jazz fest culture has really evolved and opened up its doors to all different types of music.
Being in New York, you must have been in touch with also the jazz world. Is that kind of true, or?
I actually wasn't so much in the jazz world when I was in New York. I was a lot younger, and I sort of ended up being in the hip-hop world more so than anything. I did a lot of open mics in the blues, in small blues sort of jazz clubs, but that scene was always older, and at that time I was very young, and my voice was still young and still developing and still finding itself. And to be in those clubs in New York, you have to be very confident and very sure, and at the time I wasn't. So I found myself sort of singing in the hip-hop world, rap.
Everybody who sings or who's a musician has some kind of heroes or icons who he or she listened to. Who's it in your case that you really got inspired by?
Well, I've always been inspired by singer-songwriters, and I am a big fan of Steve Earle, who's a country guy. Nina Simone was always sort of somebody I gravitated to. John Lee Hooker was another artist that I could not get enough of. More modern artists, that's tricky. I am a fan of, sort of bands, like big bands like Radiohead. I was always a big fan of, and classic rock bands like Led Zeppelin and sometimes the Rolling Stones. So I guess there are many, I've had many, many influences, but the people that are closest to me in terms of the musicians I deeply respect, it's people like David Bowie, Nina Simone, John Lee Hooker, Betty Davis, even Miles Davis. I really liked him a lot. Rashawn Roland Kirk. Wow, I have many. Steve Earle, Dolly Parton, even. Wow. Yeah, but all sorts. I mean, I grew up listening to all types of music, and to me, music wasn't genre specific. You liked a voice, you liked a story, you liked a rhythm, and so I've always been drawn to a strong story, a strong voice, and a rhythm, a movement. And often for me, it was in the blues world, sometimes the country world, but I never really paid much attention to genres. I always liked artists that just went out there and were themselves. And you could just connect with their personality, their hearts, their souls. They were obvious, they were honest, and boom, there it is. And I think sometimes nowadays in music that's missing. That honesty is not quite there as much.
You're here now with your trio, as far as I know. You have like a very intimate band now, a small band.
I do. I mean, I will be playing with a guitar player, a French guitar player. My bassist is from Italy. She's Italian. And I have a drummer with me as well, and he's an Italian drummer as well. And so it's fun. It's different. Every place I go, in each continent, I have a different group of people that I play with. So it's exciting. You never know what's going to happen.
No long-term working band like...
I do. I do have people I've worked with for years and years. But when you're traveling across continent, and in today's climate, just with the music business being what it is and with festivals struggling as they are, it's harder to just bring people over for one festival here and one festival there. So, depending on where I am, that's what I do.
You do the singing and songwriting too, right?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And how would you describe it? How is it, who's it inspired by? Or maybe what it is it inspired by?
Well, my music is inspired by people, by other people, by the things that I've seen, by the conversations I've had or I've heard. I often am listening to other people when I shouldn't be, and I get really inspired by that. I'm inspired by gestures, by humans, by how we interact, and so I write stories about that, about what I see in terms of myself interacting with other people and how I see other people interacting amongst themselves and how I see governments interacting with workers. I like to speak about the world. So I guess the world is my big inspiration. It comes from my heart and my soul and the sounds from the world, and I'm just doing my best to create enjoyment and positivity in a time where things are not so happy. And I'm grateful for this festival. I'm so excited that a new festival actually exists because it's so hard. And so I hope people come out and support it so that it can keep going. That's my message. Support the festival.